Hi everyone, I'm Nicolas Bras, here on Soundpaint to introduce you to my new instrument, the glass marbles Lyre. It starts with a material I love, tiny glass marbles I got from a water treatment plant. I use them a lot for various shakers, and the sound I had in mind for this instrument was a delicate rain on the strings, to get a long, maintained note with a unique texture. I made a few tests and the best string family for this use is definitively the Lyre. One part with a resonant box for the sound, one part empty to let the marble pass. I tried to design various possibilities to play the instrument with different levels of technology, with a keyboard, with automation, and I had to choose the simplest level, because I'm very bad with technology. So my final prototype is soft pipes and spring clips as a keyboard, plexiglass tank and a receptacle for the marbles. When it's empty, I have to refill it. This instrument has a 3 minutes autonomy. All of this to tell you that this instrument is a lot better as a virtual instrument. That's why I carefully sampled the largest range possible. Now let's see what it can do with the power of Soundpaint.
Sick. Hey everyone, my name is Dan Chimy. People like to call me Chimy, and you can too. I am a bassist, sound designer, and composer living in Los Angeles, and we are back checking out another amazing library from the genius mind of Nicolas Bras. This is the Glass Marble Lyre. Now, as always, I'm sure you've heard from the man himself about how this instrument was created, but it is my understanding that it actually involves dropping hundreds of little glass marbles on a single string and capturing the sound of those marbles hitting the string, kind of almost like a strum effect. Now, there was some debate what to call this instrument in terms of the broader heading. It could be a custom design instrument, it could be a string instrument, but we settled on guitar. The Lyre has a pretty rich history in terms of the evolution of string instruments, and this is definitely one of the most unique takes on the Lyre sound that I have ever heard. You get one part with this library, but that is all you need because it is a fun one, and I think that's enough talking. Let's just hear what it sounds like. Now, I'm a huge fan of just internal motion that is absolutely inherently baked into the sound of the instrument, and that's basically all this library is, right? You are hearing those glass marbles, those fine glass marbles, falling one by one in quick succession. I love it because it's very clearly a string instrument, but it almost has a certain rain stick aspect to it as well, and gives kind of a strum-like sound that you would never be able to achieve really quickly. Maybe some of the real pros could, but it's so unique. And we get releases as well, I believe. Yes? Two different kinds of sounds. One thing that I really like about it is it's a very dynamic instrument in terms of the attack, right? You don't immediately get the meat of the sound when you depress the key. Right? It comes a little bit after the fact. There's just a little bit of anticipation, probably just the opening of whatever was holding the marbles. I mean, that is so unique and so useful. You can also tell that quite a few round robins were done for this library, and you can most notably hear it on the attacks, what that initial dropping onto the string sounds like. Check this out. That's quite immediate. Maybe a little more delayed. Very different. I love that one. Like a little marble kind of like just popped out for a second. Where is that one? There it is. That's so cool. A good match made in heaven here is the Lyre and the shimmer reverb. As you could imagine, there's a pitched element to it. So all of those little upper harmonic resonances just kind of spooling up and creating basically a nice little pitch mix here. It's really, really nice. Gorgeous. It's very meditative, right? One thing I did want to mention, if you're not a fan of the delayed attack or delayed meat of the note, you can always, of course, go here and grab your offset tool and just budge it up just a little bit. So it's a little bit more immediate. Very, very flexible sound. I'm hoping you can see where we're going to go with this in the program section. I made about 15 of these for you, so I think why not? Let's go through them all. And I just want to start with the main program that I made here. This is basically just a little bit of envelope love, just moving the offset just a little bit off to get a slightly more immediate attack to the meat of the note, just a touch of EQ, compression, and plate reverb. As we've talked about before, main programs are really meant to be just kind of like a quick dial up, slight treatment to just really bring out the soul of the instrument. And I hope I've done that here. Just a little bit of mod wheel on the highest band in our EQ. Good trick I learned from Trolls very early on, just to give a little bit of dynamic shift, but that's my main part. And then from that point on, everything gets slightly more experimental. This part here called Bits uses the bit brush, definitely going for like a down-sampled, lo-fi kind of vibe, as well as time. I really find that the time rack module can give you some almost ring mod kind of bit crushy sounds if you're using frozen, which is 0 times, right? Completely frozen, or close to frozen. It can get some really, really nice artifacts going there. And yeah, I dig it. Boy, you can really hear the round robins when you when you pick something out with offset and then use the time to freeze it, because it's freezing something slightly different along the way. Kind of a goofy patch, but I mean, it could really, really sound awesome if you get some kind of like fast arp going. Sick. Speaking of ARP, here's one that I made specifically for the ARP section. It's tuned a fifth apart, and it's utilizing, I believe, bandpass filter. Yes, some distortion, some compression, some EQ, and a Lexi reverb. I go back and forth on which reverb is the best. I think I have to go with the shimmer just because it's so beautiful with that extra pitch mix, but Plate and Lexi work really well too. Nice. And moving right along, this one is called Cloud Choir, because when you filter this instrument down, when you take out some of the kind of harsher highs, the attacks, you get a really, really warm, fluffy sound. When paired with a shimmer reverb, it becomes this very atmospheric, spacey vibe. It definitely has some vocal qualities to it as well, which I tried to bring out in the EQ here. So this one is called Cloud Choir. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this is also using dynamic sustains via the mod wheel. So it's just a simple toggle here, but you actually get dynamic control through the velocities, kind of morphing seamlessly, utilizing the mod wheel. It's a one-click switch, and it's super, super effective, especially for like some of the legato stuff, but also works quite well here. Very, very nice. You could even make that like even darker if you want to maintain the kind of sizzle of the marbles dropping, but even that is a little too harsh for you. What I would do there, you could either insert another filter, perhaps in front of or behind. I'm using the band reject filter, which I've used maybe twice in my life, but I think I liked the sound the most, actually. It was what I was going for. But you can just grab that tone slider on the actual part and get a little more darkness before it hits that. So don't be afraid to make little tweaks to existing programs to come up with your own programs. Speaking of darkening the sound, man, my transitions are on point today. Speaking of darkening the sounds, this one's called Dark Lyre, and I'm utilizing, I believe, yes, this is one of my favorite tricks. I've talked about it before. I don't know what the tone filter is in terms of the algorithm that's used, if it's one of the filter types or if it's something completely different. But I find the tone slider on the compressor is a really even way to make adjustments to your sound. And I've used the mod wheel here to kind of control it. But putting that early on in the signal chain darkens the sound, and then I'm putting it through the compression setting of the digital distortion, which I also like quite a bit. It's really, really round, fluffy, not as aggressive as the analog distortion. And then I'm using the digital reverb sound here with the tone also down. So this is a very, very dark timbre. That bass sounds amazing. I like that is like an awesome low, like it's slowed down. Obviously the instrument wasn't sampled that low. That would be very, very complex, but it's such a nice, interesting timbre. And if you use offset, in fact, there's a program coming up, spoiler alert, later on called How Low, where I actually do just that. This one is pretty fun. I tried to like bake in as much motion as I could into the part, so I chose, I believe, 5 LFOs. Yes, 5 LFOs here, all modulating multiple or single things on an EQ band. To me, with the round robins and with this being such an interesting instrument from note to note, if I'm adding even more frequency control and motion into it, that's a more interesting sound for me as a listener. And so I really tried to kind of get this thing moving, and that's just such a cool look, and can guarantee you that your take 1, take 2, and take 3 will all sound slightly different based on where these parameters are. And just put it into an analog filter, nothing fancy, just a low pass with a little bit of mod wheel control, compressor, and of course shimmer reverb. It's very interesting. I mean, it's giving sort of like a phaser effect, but not actually. The way I came up with these motions and these specific frequencies is I just kind of went through and highlighted all my best ofs, my favorites. I'm like, oh, this is a very, very nice frequency here, and tried to create something that would just keep things moving on long sustains like that. This next one's called Fuzz Drive, and it's probably the most guitar out of all of the programs I made. You know, again, I tried to use some stuff that I really don't use that often. The fuzz setting on the digital distortion is something that often gets lost for me, just because if I want something growly, if I want something super, you know, rough, I'm going to go probably first to analog distortion. But this thing sounds great, and it kind of gives a lead sound to this particular program that I'm quite fond of. So what is that? That must be the release. Yeah, because I have releases on. Right. So that kind of like long feedbacky sustain. It's just the release through that crazy signal chain. Sorry, I probably should have put a headphone user warning at the beginning of this. Maybe Raphael can hook me up with one of those. But that is a really cool sound, and something that's just totally different to what we've been listening to, using a good deal of offset to kind of really isolate the initial attack and release of the note. Doesn't that fuzz sound great? Like, I've totally ignored that until really kind of recently, and it's such a great effect. And then what I mentioned before, how low can you go? This is kind of my upright bass classical vibe here, at least that was what I was going for. You can tell me if I nailed it or didn't, but yeah, tuned it down an octave from where it naturally sits, and it just, it's pretty cool. And that digital reverb is just so like gnarly and resonant. This is the one to go to if you're looking for like super overtony stuff, even more so honestly than the plate, which is inherently a more resonant reverb. This thing just has a life of its own. Super sweet. And then just wind. It's always fun to try and do something sound designy, maybe something Foley related, you know, turning these instruments into kind of generators, noise generators. I put 3 layers here, all tuned and micro-tuned slightly apart to kind of give a whistling wind sound, and I think it's pretty successful. One thing I want to mention before I play this, I've used 2 layers here of one note same, roughly a fourth apart with just a little bit of micro-tuning love on the second part. Sounds like this. So those 2 pitches will always exist, and then on this third part here, I've given you default mode, which means you can kind of choose whatever the third pitch is. This is really to control how much tonality you want in the sound, where in the frequency spectrum you want it to sit. So very, very different sounds based on what note you play. This one's called Lite, Pluck, and it is just that. A nice, simple pluck kind of sound. With a little bit of brightness control on the mod wheel if you want it. Going through my favorite of the delays, the Bucket Brigade delay, which is always full of character and lo-fi vibes. This next one is very similar to the last one in vibe or utility. It's called Ping Delayed. I tried to get a slightly more resonant tone out of this one, giving a really, really big boost here around the 560 hertz range in the EQ. But again, just a really, really short attack, which by the way, I'm getting using both offset and a very, very fast decay to a 0 sustain point. So always cool to take something that is inherently a sustained sound, a sustained instrument, and just really see what kind of pluck tone you can get out of it. And it varies greatly based on where this offset is set, right? That would make sense, right? Little slight timbral shifts to just kind of really get to the core of what sound you're going for. Really sauced this one up. It's called Quite Modulated and involves a phaser with a rate that is controlled by the mod wheel, some chorus, and I think, what else? Oh yeah, I've got an LFO just kind of goosing the time of this delay here, which always gives kind of a warpy effect. So the result is quite modulated. And there's the warp from that delay time. Where is it here? There it is. That delay time just moving ever so slightly. Just a little range. Really cool effect. Here's a fun one called Random Distant Chatter. Perfect for scoring all of your robot conversations. Basically, this is achieved through a moderately fast decay to a 0 sustain point. So we're having that kind of just immediate decay to nothing. Combined with a random LFO going to the pitch. So you're getting kind of just like these little chatters, and it's never going to be quite the same. So lots of creative ways to use this. This one's simple. This one's just called a soft octave, and it is just that. One part is an octave below the other, and I think I have done, just a little bit of filtering here, some shimmer reverb, a pretty modest amount of EQ, and then the thing of note is I've taken the time of the second part and I've sped it up 2 times. So you do get a little bit of a time effect when you're tuning down parts. I sometimes like to try and counter that with the time module. Works better sometimes than others, but I think works really well here, especially when it's filtered down. Telling you, that shimmer reverb, that's the secret to this library. It really, really is. Moving to something a little more ethereal, this one is called Tonal Spirits, and I've put it through quite a bit of processing here. A rain delay into a compressor, and then followed up by a grain reverb. So a lot of wash, a lot of modulation, and then you work in this motion from the chorus here using the mod wheel. It gives a really, really interesting effect, but I think you'll like this one. Perhaps I should have called it atonal spirits, because there are pitches. It's definitely pitched. You get your ranges, but it's not quite as clear as what I would deem tonal. So that was on me. And finally, we're getting into the really, really washy stuff here. I have 4 parts here, all tuned to play kind of a really pretty cluster through an EQ, another EQ, which I think has, yes, some LFO action, kind of goosing that 2K to 4K range. I think you'll find that that's really the sweet spot for a lot of the harmonics in these sustains. Going into a compressor, again, shimmer reverb, just widening the stereo image just a little bit with the stereo image module. Always helpful. A plethora of harmonics there. But yeah, isn't that beautiful? Just such an angelic, harmonically rich sound. So fun to work with this instrument and take it in so many different directions. As with everything in Soundpaint, you know, these are standalone instruments that in and of themselves are beautiful, beautiful representations of the brilliant mind of Nicolas Bras, but they are also source material to do crazy stuff like this. Process them, really kind of work with all the reverbs, put reverbs into reverbs and hear how that sounds. I can tell you now, I've been working with this for a couple days, the kid-like approach to just seeing what kind of magic you can milk out of this library is the right one. Just, there are no wrong answers. Put reverbs into other reverbs. Try 2 instances of delays. Go crazy. It is a welcome addition to the Soundpaint family. You know, in the world of music production and scoring, so many of the same sounds are getting regurgitated and used over and over again. Soundpaint continues to bring you completely original instruments like this, timbres never heard before, that are just gonna make your scores sound that much more unique, make your music production projects that much more interesting and individual to you. I really look forward to you all picking this up and taking this library in whatever directions are unique and individual to you. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, this is Chimy, signing out. Take care.